Heyo, Chris, Liege Games, best crowdfunding roundup on the interwebs. If you're not subscribed, smash the subscribe button, smash the like button, because I'm going to give you everything you need to know about all the new games that launched this week, because I have read through the pages, I have read through the rules, and I'm going to dive in to tell you what you need to know, the mechanics that are involved, and everything else in between. Let's do this. Are you ready? Let's go. First up, here we go. It is Septima from Mindclash Games. What do you need to know? It's almost $300,000 in less than the first 24 hours. Now, this is supposed to be the Mindclash's most accessible, shortest length game. Now, that may be appealing to you, that may be putting off, but let's talk about why you should be not judging a book by its cover here. This is a world of witchcraft, Salem Trials-esque, where you are part of a coven trying to make your coven better than your opponents in this 1 to 4 player game with a regular mode and an advanced mode. It is going to give you simultaneous action selection that you can even talk about with other players, because if you make the same action selection as someone else, you get to piggyback essentially and get a bonus effect or action of what you're doing similarly. But if you choose to do so, then in this game, it's going to activate the suspicion or increase the suspicion of the witch hunters, who are also going to be lurking on the board trying to catch the witches in the coven. Because obviously, if your magic is more prevalent or present, they're going to find it easier. That's what the semi-co-op twist is. How much do you want to cooperate to potentially get more actions and to make your gathering of resources and crafting potions and healing patients easier? But how much can you do at the same time without getting captured by one of the witch hunters in the first place? Now, you can shapeshift here, as it says, which gives you the ability to decrease the suspicion raised or just lower the level of the suspicion that you're going to generate, but you have more limited action selection, although they are more efficient. This is a very intriguing concept. Now, you can play solo mode. It's a Turksy designed solo mode. There's a couple videos here on what you're actually doing, and like one of the other games later on in this video, I highly recommend you actually watch a video. I don't recommend this a lot. Most of the time, I am a rule book. Go read the rule book. Don't watch a 50-minute video. But this is a game where I read the rule book, and it's only like a 6 to 8 page rule book, but it's dense and it doesn't give a good grasp of how the gameplay flows after reading through it and seeing how the parts interconnect and seeing some of the spaces. I mean, there's literally not a picture of the full board that you see in Gaming Rules' video here. You don't see either of these boards pictured fully in the rulebook to get a sense of where things are at and how the interactions are happening and what happens when you craft one of 4 types of potions that you have access to based on the resources and how you're gathering the resources and how you collect them from the hexes that you're touching. It just doesn't give as quite a nice synopsis as I would like, unfortunately. And I think that actually speaks more to my interest, personally, that having read the rulebook, having watched a little bit of the video, I'm actually less interested because of the deep connections that are still there that Minecraft is known for. Although it says sub 2 hour gameplay, the interactions and the Euro style of it is still very much Mindclash, and that's where you need to decide, is that still for you or not? It's a deluxeification. There's only one pledge level, but this is the other thing that I'm going to put out there right now in this video. If you're paying close attention, they say very clearly, if you have any consideration, the pledge manager is going to have a higher price. Right now, they put it out at the €1 pledge. It's going to be higher. Period. Boom. There you go. The deluxeifications, it's just going to be silkscreened. And say what you want about Mindclash is that they have also, like many of the other ones I will talk about later in this video on the other projects, they are putting it out at a probably better price than you'll able to find on the secondary market or at a retail level later on. They don't do exclusives in that sense, but you're going to be getting a better deal if that's what your value is most concerned of. the double-sided mat here, the advanced rules, the solo rules. And I'll say one other thing here as I pull the rule book up for you that I'm not a fan of, and it's a minor thing, but it's a major thing too as I was reading through it. They say right up here, if you're doing the base game, ignore purple. If you're doing the advanced game, ignore green. Like, it gets a little confusing trying to remember as you're reading through this, because you can see all of the green and the red and which one is which, and 3 and 2 and choose 2 but put a third, and then when playing the base game only draw 8 instead of drawing 9. It's just, I wish it was more consolidated separately, or give me a separate column or something. It seems it just seems a little bit overdone in that sense. And again, I'm probably a minority. The rest of you are going to look at this and go, oh yeah, that makes sense. I can remember which one is which very easily, and it won't be confusing at all. I won't accidentally read the red box instead of the green box, as I'm going through there, because it's fine, Chris. And I just have to put that out there that someone reading it through the first time, there was a little bit more of that to keep track of. Obviously, having it in front of you is also going to help significantly. They run through the silk printing here and the meeples and everything deluxified, including the tray and everything that you're going to get here. The retail edition, they give you the difference here, and yeah, you're going to get it a couple months early, 6 months early. Yep, there you go. All of the big channels here seem to have videos, so if you want to check it out, again, there is plenty of information in terms of discussion. But I will say, it's basically 20 turns that you're taking over a series of 4 big rounds where you get 5 actions per round. Unlocks, deluxifications are already there. It's going to run you just under, probably around $100 for North America. It's going to probably run you around the same for Europe as well. It may be subject to VAT. So all of you in Europe that I just mentioned, you're going to be probably paying extra duties. So be aware of that as well. So that may bump the price up another, 15-20% for you guys over in Europe. As I said, this is not any lighter. It's shorter. This individual action of simultaneous action selection is more straightforward, but it is not necessarily a less complex game in that nature, which is why ultimately right now my gut reaction is I'm going to pass on it, but I will definitely be giving it a look-see in about 13 days when it nears the end as well. So next up we have the other big one, and this is another very interesting prospect launching on the same day from companies that are known for heavy Euro style mechanisms. You have a lighter style worker placement game here from Eagle Gryphon Games in the realm of Kanban, being Bot Factory. Now, it's only 50% raised in the first day, but I mean, it's still very impressive because they're probably going with more of a true funding goal here. And as with some of the other campaigns that I wondered about, the question was, are they going to offer other things during the campaign? But it appears that they're going to offer them during the Pledge Manager. But if you actually look, it appears that most of the money is actually for this game right now. The 900 people or so that are backing it, that puts it pretty much at the price point that it's raised right now. So there's not a lot of extra fluff in there in terms of some of the other ones I think like the second On Mars campaign had. So Bot Factory, what are you doing in Bot Factory? You have a main action selection system here, a set of 4 boards that you're going to be placing your workers on a series of connecting spaces. And depending on where Sandra, the Bot Factory manager, is located, you may either not be able to play in that area, or it may cost you more resources in order to play in that area in the first place. And she progressively moves along to the next open space each round. Now, this is what I was saying in terms of lighter in that sense. It's a shorter playtime. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say it's quote unquote less complex though, just like with Septima. 30 to 60 minutes, 1 to 4 players. The overview, essentially, like I said, you're planning, you're manufacturing, you're putting pieces of bots together, and it's going to earn you victory points as you do so. And the number of pieces of the bot that you put together, they are 3 in total to make a complete bot. If you are the one who puts in the first piece, okay, you get this amount of resource or this amount of victory. If you put the second piece in, then there's 2 pieces, then you get this. And if you get all 3, well, then you get the bot, which gives you something else. And again, say what you will with Septima there. The nice thing is a lot of these pledges and campaigns this week, there is 1 level to back at, and that's $48. There's a few stretching goals here, variants that are, pretty typical to Eagle Gryphon Games. And so you can check it out from what's going to be happening that. And you have, similarly, screen printed meeples. how to play. The draft rulebook is right here. You can check it out as well. It's a little bit more outside of my depth in terms of the interactions. There's a video here from Board Game Nexus and Gaming with Sidekicks, and that's it for English. That's it. That's everything. That's all you really need to know. If you want to check it out, it's going to be probably just over half the price of Septima. But the question is, do you want a game like this? Is this a niche game, sort of like when I am going to be talking about in the near future, Terra Nova, a lighter version of Terra Mystica? How well does that fit a niche in the hobby where there aren't a lot of games that are shorter in length and slightly less complex or slightly more streamlined than the 3-hour long worker placement or Euro style games in general? Well, we'll see what this does in terms of final funding, and we'll go from there. That's Bot Factory. We have 2 sleeper hits here this week, and this is the first of the 2, and this is Skyrise. This is a remake, a retheme of a previously put out game, and this is coming from Roxley. And if you're familiar with Roxy with any shape or form, you know that they're putting out a top-notch product. And as they go down below and show you their other things that they've put out, Radlands, Brass, Dice Throne, all of those games, Steampunk Fusion, Steampunk Rally, all of them, they're well thought of games. Solid games. Now, they're not for everybody, but when they are for you, they are a solid hit. Now, what do you have going on in Skyrise? Because this is a very interesting building placement, auction style bidding game. That combination of things you don't see a lot of. Now, this is a retheme, as I just mentioned, of a previous game called Metropolis. Now, I haven't read through Metropolis in detail, but in general, it seems to be a very close, if not almost nearly the same style of game. And you're going to go and look at this and go, it only has a 7.0 rating, but it's in the Board Game Top 1000, so that's important to note. And it's down here for 2008 Spiel nominated. So you know it's a solid game, and I don't think Roxley would even imagine coming back to it if it wasn't solid to begin with. What you have essentially here is sections of maps that you're going to be not blindly bidding, but taking one of your buildings. All of them have numbers on the bottom that you can see, and that they're going to be face up on each player's board, and then they're going to gently put one of them on an area, and subsequently you have to put one into the next area adjacent to it that is higher or pass. And the one who ends up with the building that is the highest number of the sequence after everyone else passes gets to keep that building in the spot that it ends up in, and then all of the other buildings that were sort of put in a chain, not necessarily a straight line, but even a loop here, however adjacency is going to work, because it varies depending on the area, gets to take their building off and retry it again. And this game is done over 2 different eras. It's very interesting with these 2 eras. The first era ends when one person has all of their buildings down, because in the second era you get a whole different set of buildings, including a wonder, which is sort of like a trump card, if you will. If you ever lay your wonder down in the sequence, it automatically just gets built in whatever area you want. And you're going, well, Chris, that seems relatively straightforward. Well, there's a lot of nuance there, and we'll talk about whether or not the collector's edition is worth it here in a minute. But here you go. Here you see the other Brass and the other Santorinis. But here is the main mechanism, right? You're putting these buildings down. That's the wonder. It captures all of them. But you'll also notice on this board, there are several other features and tokens that you're going to be having to take in consideration. Not only in the color of the area that you're placing it, building it, but also the token that is there is going to give you perhaps more of a non-linear scoring system, set collection-esque vibe with the faction discs that you acquire. And some of them are just straight up the 4 factions. Some of them will give you endgame bonuses on this part of the board over here on the left. Some of them will increase the bonuses in general of all of what you're going to be getting from the endgame scoring. And so that's really sort of the differentiation. And I'm not sure the original Metropolis has all of those endgame scoring conditions. That would be the only thing that I can't tell just on surface value whether or not it's the same. Build your wonder. If it's a 3 to 4 player game, everybody gets 1 wonder. If it's a 2-player game, it has 2 wonders. And I would argue that just based on the rules, you can play it at a 2-player game, but it's a lot of scaled, a lot of changes. And so this is primarily meant to be a 3 to 4 player game if you're really interested. I did not see a solo mode, so I don't think it's much for you solo junkies on this one in particular, but boy, howdy is it beautiful to look at. I just don't know whether or not it's worth a $75 before shipping from a deluxeified standpoint. Now, obviously, with Roxley, they have put out the value value wise in terms of deluxeifications on their previous games that are going to be more expensive. I mean, I looked at the previously mentioned Radlands when the deluxe and the super deluxe pledge levels were out after the campaign, and they were higher than what it was on the actual campaign itself. Now, you can argue that the secondary market may give you a little bit of better value, but can you bank on that? And the answer really is no. So this is what it's bringing. This is what it's giving you. It's just whether or not you want the blinged out version, because this is blinged out, folks. And it's very tempting. Now, a metal key to the city, I think that's, take $5 off the price and don't give me that thing. That's a little ridiculous, but it's more for all of you coin collectors out there. The collection, I mean, this is seriously significantly blinged out. And this is cool to look at. It's designed, but it's also purely non-gameplay. So do you really need to spend an additional $30 almost to get an extra tray and slightly upgraded miniatures? The value will be there. I'm not going to argue that, but do you need them? Now, pre-washed, oh man, wooden token pack. I would love just the wooden token pack included in the collector's edition. That would get me to get the collector's edition, to be very, forward about that. Funding goals, they don't offer a whole lot of exclusives when it comes to gameplay content. So Roxley, better or worse, doesn't do that. So you don't need to worry about it from that aspect. And we'll eventually have all these quests unlocked when the campaign ends. You can check out the rulebook that I've sort of synopsed for you already in the short run. And this is true. I would argue that and agree with this, that they are offering a lesser price point. It's just whether or not you really want to spend a full $75 before shipping. Shipping's probably gonna be what, like $20? Yeah, it's gonna be about $10 they say for zone 1, but that's not bad actually. It's probably one of those where they've supplemented some of the shipping in the actual cost of this being $75, right? If people are going to bulk at the $20 shipping and $65 price, but $75 price and $9 shipping? Ooh, color me intrigued. But that's why this is my dark horse of the week, number 1. Really give it a look-see. It's already killing it at $162,000. Which you could argue that maybe for Roxley, that's a little bit lower than their other campaigns, but I don't think this is any less of a game, and I guarantee you don't really have one like it in your collection. So check it out if you're interested. Next up, from R2I, Road to Infamy Games, this is Globetrotting, and this is a very unique aesthetic mechanism that they're going for here. They are going with an actual globe that you put together and that you use basically an equator system to measure the distance between points, which determines how much money that cost is going to affect you in terms of your budget going from place to place. Essentially what you're doing here is you have 3 cards in the middle of the board that you're laying down, these destination cards, and you just get to choose one of them. Now, it's not you choose one and then the next person chooses one and then the third person gets one that's left over. No, you put down 3 simultaneously and then you get to pick whichever one you want, and everyone else can pick the exact same one that you do, but they're maybe starting from a different location and they have different bucket list cards, essentially quest cards, if you will, to go to certain areas, to link together certain types of areas, or to end up in a certain type of area in the first place in order to achieve bonus points at the end. Again, just like Skyrise, this one is a different dynamic at a 2-player count as a 3 and a 4-player count, so you need to be aware. The 2-player count, you have sort of a different system of scoring in terms of the bucket lists and the secret or quest objectives, whereas with 3 to 4 players, you're actually putting one in between you and the player next to you. And so if you both end up at the same location more than once, or each time you end up at the same location, you mark a little checkbox there, and you get extra bonus points in addition. And here is the budgeting where you have to mark off, and again, that scores different end game victory points depending on who has spent the most versus the least. There are several other iconography here that are going to the end game scoring, including the module tiles, and these go to the travel companions. This is the thing I was saying that goes right between people. The festival module here, this is for the 2-player game in terms of trying to go to different festivals in different seasons. That's what the green, the yellow, and the orange represent, 3 different seasons, because during this game, you are going to be managing not just 1, not just 2, but 3 different routes simultaneously on your globe. So in case you don't get the right destination that pops up in the 3 that are given to you on a single round, because this goes through 9 rounds, you can afford not to take that on your spring destination if that's going to, one, set you too far off on your budget, but two, not put you anywhere in terms of the secret objectives for that one. So it gives you some mitigation there with going through 3 different routes at the same time. And do you like the fact that you have to manage 3 routes at the same time? Is that going to be too much? Is that going to cause a little bit of AP, or is it not? Now with Road to Infamy, just like their previous game, you might know them from Canvas and Canvas Reflections, which was their most recent campaign, or one of their more recent campaigns. The price, just like with Roxley, has been very much so reduced on the crowdfunding campaign versus picking it up on the secondary market. And they don't have a lot of exclusives just like Roxley, so the two are very similar in that sense, but you're going to get a little bit of a better price overall. Now, this is something that they don't talk about in the rulebook, the asymmetric traveler card, asymmetric powers, and the global objectives. They talk about that. Those are endgame conditions, endgame scoring for everyone that are all the same. That's one of those other additional ones that I mentioned up top. The how to play is here. There's one video of how to play, and then they give you a little bit of run through of everything I've said there. Rado is the only video on the page, in case you're wondering. And it's just non-gameplay content upgrades right now. So you can get Canvas if you previously missed it with the deluxe editions, and don't go in there, which I believe actually was their most latest game on crowdfunding. There you go. That's everything you need to know about Globetrotting. A very interesting concept. We'll see how it holds up and what it looks like at the final stage of things, because it's a gimmick, but is it a good gimmick? It's a little hard to tell. It looks solid, but whether or not it will be for you when you actually get to play it, that's one of those games where I could see it going either way. But I love seeing the innovation regardless. And now we have my second dark horse of the week. This is Pagan, Fate of Roanoke. This is a second print run. Literally, US backers don't have their copies right now, but everywhere else in the world does. It's basically out of stock everywhere else in the world. It was a very small print run for the first one. It's being compared to a social deduction witch versus hunter, Salem witch trials-esque Android Netrunner. I used a lot of keywords there, but the gist of it is that you are going head to head in a dueling style game, social deduction-esque, with 3 actions on a turn that you are going to help utilize off of a central board, but also one of your individual boards, either the witch or the hunter, in order to help slowly deduce, one, which of the suspects of the villagers is actually the witch, or getting enough tiles on villagers in order to complete the witch's ritual in order to win. If the hunter kills the wrong witch or captures the wrong witch, they lose. If the witch can't complete the ritual, well, they lose. And that's really what you need to know. The first print run came with 4 expansions, 1 big box and 3 small ones. So although this is a card game, although this is a deck versus deck game, usually of 50 cards versus 50 cards, they also have an introduction scenario that you can do just as 30 cards that they lay out very nicely in the rule book. But otherwise, the extra expansions offer a couple different mechanisms, but also an expanded card catalog so that you can customize it a little bit to your own extent. Now, there are 4 different types of cards on each side, and we'll talk about the different pledge levels here in a second. We'll skip past this because you don't really need to know about that, especially if you weren't one of those previous backers. All you need to know is that the first time around, if you're going to be getting it, it's going to cost you about $75, and that's what it's going to look like, at least with the big box expansion. I'm not sure how I feel about some of the inclusions that they've got here with some of the lower levels, like they're making you get the wooden tokens and an art book just to get some of the new stuff. So say what you will about the lower levels, I'm not a huge fan of that. However, you're going to be doing a bluffing style meta-esque game where you are going head to head witch versus hunter. Now, I mentioned the deck customization, and I mentioned the 4 types of cards that each the hunter and the witch has. There are 4 different types of cards, but I mean, if they're familiar with any of these games in general, you know, you have the events, you know, you have your instants, you know, you have your reactions, and you have your permanents. So there's some classification, some variation of those. And if you like that, well, then they actually don't allow you just to do random customization. And what I mean by that is they put very specific rules on the customization. You know, you have to have 10 cards of every single 4 type, essentially. So you can't have like 15 or 20 of one type and really short yourself on the other, which makes people like myself who aren't good from that aspect of balancing and choosing, it makes it a little bit more constrained, which actually I feel like makes it a little bit easier for those of us that don't have the time to spend. I know that I have to have 10 of these. I know that I have to have 10 of these. I know that I have to have 10 of these. And then it makes it more straightforward. and it just seems to be heavier than I expected, but also lighter. It's not anywhere near Android Netrunner heavy, but it is more nuanced. It is more depth in terms of the variety of the actions that you're going to need to know, because it definitely is asymmetric as well. When I say that the actions on the witch's side are different than the hunter side, it means that if you swap, it's going to be learning a brand new system. Not a brand new system necessarily, but it's at least actions that are going to give different values. Sort of like if you've ever played Slay the Spire, right? When you have a different character there, the deck system is relatively the same, right? You've got your permanents, you've got your instants, you've got all of those pieces of your deck, but the way in which the character uses them and the way that they are important in different aspects are completely different. And so that's what this gives me vibes of. This is a 36-page rulebook, and so it is not as light as, say, Skyrise or Globetrotters when you're looking at it. It's not as light as a lot of the other two-player dueling games that I like and that I tend to favor. Exceed, Battlecon, Yomi, Sakura Arms. Those are lighter in terms of the rules. There is more depth to this akin to Android Netrunner, and that's the sneaking and the back and forth goes as well, because what you have is you have this central board which has 9 villagers in it, and these are all the videos I think mostly from the first crowdfunding campaign. And you're trying to figure out, as there are 3 different sections of them, casting spells, claiming allies, gaining locations, and investigating the villagers as you go along, trying to play the meta game. There is a definite bluffing akin to Android Netrunner, sort of like when you're trying to go to the different servers. The hunter is just trying to figure out which of the 9 suspects on this main board is the actual witch. The witch is laying tokens down in order to complete the ritual, and they have to have enough tokens on the right villagers in order to cast it. But if you're laying them on the right villagers, then the hunter's going to start to know where to go and what to do. So that's where the bluffing aspect is. And believe me, again, when I say that this is asymmetric in terms of how you're going to be using both the hunter, which can gain allies, is going to have to spend influencing cards in order to keep their allies, but also the witch is going to have to summon powers of nature and brew potions to utilize them at the right time to keep the hunter off balance. The rulebook is right here. Tabletopia is out there. This is looking like just a very, 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 very solid, but it's going to be much heavier. Now, not heavy, but it's going to be heavier than those other games I mentioned. And I think that's probably the biggest take-home point. If you're looking for something light, breezy, and able to play back and forth with your significant other or your main gaming partner, this is going to, again, be more like a meta-evolving game that's going to get the most benefit from playing repeated plays as the same character, either the witch or the hunter. And if you can't do that, it might be worth passing. But as I mentioned, it's sold out pretty much on the few distributors that have it from the first time around. Now that may change as the North American copies get into backers and publishers, or distributors, I mean. But I also would not be surprised if that does not drastically change, because this was not a huge print run, and the fact that they're doing the second print run already, because I mean, it got noticed on Board Game Geek Hotness. And that's why they did it. And they said, let's strike while the iron is hot. And that's also why it's almost funded at a $30,000 funding goal. So if you have interest, this is going to be one to very much watch. If any of those other games that I mentioned fit your fancy, and you're looking for something a little bit deeper and more meta evolving, without, you know, having like BattleCon where you've got 16 fighters and you're choosing a different one each time. This is going to be one or the other. So that's Pagan, Fate of Roanoke. Check it out. Next up, we have Compounded, peer-reviewed and lab notes rolling right now. This is almost funded, and this one actually, I'm a little confused why this one's funded. Now, Compounded is a game that was put out several years ago, and this is essentially a 2.0 version, but they've also said that this Compounded version, as you are building new elements and trying to proceed with a scientific method of putting these elements together, there's no rulebook. There's no description of what things are different. There's not a whole lot of sense of why get this. What do you need to know? If you go over to the FAQ here, this is the biggest aspect of things. If you scroll down here, you can see a little bit more. They talk about the roll and write and having to use actual chemistry in order to make your roll and write work, like single bonds, double bonds, triple bonds. But that's about it. That's all the information that they give you. Combined elements based on the real rules of chemistry, laboratory safety and equipment, and you get lab notes, and this is pretty much it. That's all they give you besides the pledge level. And you get through the pledge levels here, and they tell you that's about it. Now, the updates, this is the frustrating thing. This update right here, this gives you the timeline. So by the time you're viewing this, there's going to be an update of what the round looks like. But not until the middle of next week, a week after it launches, are you going to actually get to see what new is there. The experts weigh in, the art of what the game looks like, a review on July 5, and the campaign closes on the 8th. I don't understand. There's no rule book on the page yet that I don't think I missed, and they're just not telling you, which is why I'm so mystified why people are so throwing money at this. I mean, I am a chemistry major. I was a chemistry major in undergrad. I have a bachelor's in science of chemistry. So this appeals to me from a background. But I'm not going to back this because I know nothing about how the game mechanics actually work, and you don't have any of that on the page when it launches. It seems insane to me to try and be like, okay, we're going to tell you more about the game in a couple days after we've already funded. And that's why I'm so confused. I mean, this is Greater Than Games, which puts out a very good product, and I guess it's going off of name recognition right now more than anything, that this is a previous game and a good game company. But yeah. Give me a reason why this roll and write is different. Show me how it's different. You have one animation there. I want to know more. I want to know more, but I don't. 368 people right now are willing to put their money in and see where this goes. But is that going to change when more information comes out? Is that going to attract more? Why not have that information out there right from the get-go on the page in the first place? That seems like a mistake to me. Now, again, I'm probably in the minority, but tell me more about your game. I just don't know enough about it. Like, I'm attracted to it, but if you don't give me mechanics, if you don't give me why this is better than the first one, which is sort of okay-ish, at least per the Board Game Geek reviews, I don't know. And it doesn't entice me, especially when I've got other things that have already launched this week, like Skyrise, Globetrotter, and Pagan, that are eagerly looking for my money as an indie developer. Not to mention the two at the beginning, which are the massive ones of Septima and Bot Factory, sucking in a lot of money right there. So I just need more. Please show me more sooner rather than later, Greater Game Games. Thank you. Check it out, though, if you're interested. Next up, Cheese Factory, another one that I have a very obtuse concept of because there's no rulebook on the page. It's basically an action set collection style of game for 2 to 4 players in a light filler-esque theme of creating cheese. You get 3 actions of making a set collection type of deck. It reminds me of Fantastic Factories, if you will, because of the basic engine building that you're doing of creating new cheese and scoring up to 20 points in order to win, because they show you what a actual card recipe looks like here. Collect these resources, make this cheese if you have this recipe, get 20 points to win. Collect the different ingredients, the different machines that are going to give you different ways of creating and mashing and putting together, different calamities that you're going to have to start to deal with, and rare cards that are going to go along, and chefs that have asymmetric powers. Price point there is $25, including a print and play and a tabletop simulator, but that's it. That's it. That's the whole page. There's no rulebook. There's nothing else on there. There's no videos. There's no gameplay example of how the rounds interact or what these sort of mechanisms look like. That's just it. I'm just mystified why this is getting $17,000. Now, Jason Anarchy Games, Reap, was one I almost backed last year, and it's got a few other small card games and things like that, so it's clearly got an audience of followers from the previous campaigns, but it has less than Reap did. I was really impressed by what Reap had and what Reap looked like when it was launched, and I think it looks like a solid filler game. But keep clicking Pagan. I just don't know with this. And yet it's got $17,000 with 400 people doing it. So I feel like I'm in the minority again compared to Compounded. But if you're looking for something like this and cheese is really your thing, check it out, I guess. But there you go. Now I'm going to talk about this for completion's sake. This is Brothers Bond, the game. It's raised $4,000, almost $5,000 of its $50,000 funding goal. I saw this pop up on Facebook ads plenty of times in the last couple months, and never really got any more information. There was never really any more discussion or interaction. This is the first time created. It's a dungeon crawl-esque game with multi-layered cards where you sort of overlap them on top of each other to take actions. And depending on what's on top in order to take the action sort of mitigates or helps you figure out what the bonuses are going to be, and you're just having this main token of the group that moves across the map and maybe spawns an event or maybe doesn't spawn an event. You have various character dice of different colors that have different probabilities that are used for ability checks of either one or a different type, because one of the stats or two of the stats that you're using each cover 3 of the abilities each. So you've got one stat essentially that covers 3 abilities and another stat that covers 3 abilities, if that makes sense. And then whatever that stat is determines how many dice you're rolling for these 3 and how many dice you're rolling for these 3, because that's the main gist of it when you're going across the events, when you're just having sort of a storyline objective event that just pops up as you go from place to place. The problem I have is this is a lot of money right now, $139 for a deluxe miniature-based version of it, and the lower price being for the standee version here of $89. There's just not a lot of info. I've read through the rulebook. It reads like a rulebook that is not had a lot of outside design testing. It really reads like someone who really knows the game wrote it, but it does not read as well for someone who does not know the game. It's a little bit all over the place. It's a little bit jumping from one thing to another, and it doesn't exactly tell you how to go through it as smoothly. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of gameplay. Like I mentioned here, you're moving from one spot to another. You're having these events that pop up or the encounters that they talk about, potentially a battle that happens and you get to lay them out in whatever configuration that you're given, and then the multi-layering of the cards as actions in the actual battle itself, and you have action spots on all of these cards that are going to be different that you can potentially choose which one you want to take. And that's about all I know. The rest of it needs to be a little bit more clarified in terms of just the writing and the concept of it. I don't think that there's a bad concept in here, but it's just very muddled in terms of trying to figure out what it actually is. And the issue with that also is the only video down here. I actually tried to read through the rulebook, and then I watched this video, this playthrough with Becca Scott from Good Time Society. But it's from a convention, and I can't even hear what they're saying. There's more background noise in this video than there is in one of my videos. Sorry. Then there's more background noise from the convention than what can be heard being said by one of the designers and Becca going through the game. So it makes it very, very difficult to even understand what's going on. And the issue I have is not that it's done like that, but you have plenty of people like me out there, and not even saying me, like there are plenty of other people out there that if you reached out and you said, hey, would you mind making a video for free? That they would do it, and they would do it in a very quality way. And so it's not utilizing the resources that are at your fingertips, and that's what it sort of looks like to me. I think it just needs fine-tuning. It needs a lot more conciseness in terms of the rulebook, in terms of the page, the why get it now, what makes it unique. Because I think there are a few unique elements in there, but I also think there's a little bit too much things going on in terms of the steps and the phases and the reactions and the encounters and some of the combat. Like, it just needs to be streamlined a little bit. A little bit of finesse there, I think, is what it can need. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere further. It's, got a tough uphill battle, even though it's just launched, but we'll see where it goes. Brothers Bond the game. Next up, we have Clash of Galliformes. Almost a third of the way done. What is this bird faring, bird riding game all about? Now, having looked at the rulebook here and looked at the game page, it really is an intriguing concept, and I'm not really sure how I feel about it yet. Basically, what you're doing is you're taking on the role as one of these bird families and trying to establish outposts and dominance on the board in sort of an area control resource gathering style game for 2 to 4 players. Now, they say they're going to be unlocking potentially a solo as well as a 5-player, but what you're doing here is you're resource managing, getting puzzle pieces together in order to create puzzles that are unlocked that give you special abilities. But there's going to be some take that as well, because there's battling on this map that you can use to fight other birds or even destroy their outposts in general. Now, outposts are not only places that you can put down, but things that allow you to gather more resources that you need to upgrade said tech trees in the first place. And if you go over the rulebook here, they give you a nice turn play example order: move, gather the resources, upgrade. And this is the interesting aspect, and this is the part I'm really a little bit concerned about and I'm not quite sure about. The game end. If one of the players has completed a puzzle and any 2 of the technologies, that can just choose to end the game right then and there. Huh? Seems a little odd. The other is the golden egg, essentially, the golden snitch, if you will, but it seems like it's another odd addition. One player can develop and expand. They can choose to give away one of their puzzles or 3 numbered or 3 tech tokens to another player. They then get the golden egg. But if you want the golden egg yourself, you can just destroy somebody else's, whoever has it, outpost or nest. And then they can take it instead of the tokens that are there. Well, why does that matter? Well, there's 9 points right there at the end. Well, you're giving away 9 points right here. It says if you have a puzzle completed. That's massive. So you're giving away 9 points to get 9 points? I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something, and I hope I am. But that seems a little bit tricky in terms of how you're going to balance that, especially if you're giving something away and then someone else can not have to give anything away and just destroy one of your little outposts like they can anytime else in the game to get the thing that you just gave away 9 points for, and then you're potentially out 18 points. That's a massive point swing. So I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, the tech tree gathering, the resource management, the little bit of engine building in that sense, the Euro optimization, sure, that definitely has an appeal. But those sort of design decisions make me go, okay, what does this actually look like? And if you get some take that, if all of your outposts are knocked out, for example, you have to start all over as a new bird. A new bird. Like, I don't think you keep like any of your upgrades. You're not out for a turn and then come back in. You just have to start all over, it looks like. That's not insignificant for a game that, even if it isn't long, is long enough that I'm not sure how I'd feel about it from that aspect. It's beautiful to look at. I love the wooden upgrade meeples. I don't know how asymmetric these are. I can't tell just off of the low, but it seems like they're relatively the same in terms of just whatever color it is, rather than the asymmetric abilities of said bird family compared to other bird family. So take that for what you will. I can't speak to that. The tokens that you're going to be placing down on the grid or the triangular base system that you can see here, and the deluxe version as well. I'm not sure it's $80 worth. I'm not sure I would feel comfortable from a value standpoint doing that from $80. I don't see enough to make me really enticed to get it now from a deluxeified side of things. So the lower pledge level is still $40, which is more reasonable, but after the shipping, it's still going to be pretty, $60-ish. So here you go. Defend, attack, move adjacency, gather resources, and build your tech tree. So how do you choose to customize it? How do you choose to make your strengths and your weaknesses? That's the sort of style of game this is. A few add-ons here with inserts and everything else, but that's Clash of Galliformes. I definitely say read the rulebook yourself. I'm probably messing something up, so don't quote me exactly on this, but there's enough in there to make me go, I'm not really sure how well I would like this on the table, and I'd probably need to see it or have it played in person before I'd feel comfortable just with this one personally. But there you go. Check it out. So next up, first going over to Gamefound, we have Amygdala. Now, I was very hyped about this game, and I have a little bit of excitement, but I also have a little bit of trepidation when it comes to this, because it reminds me very much of a game that was on crowdfunding, I believe last year, of Vivid Memories. Now, if you remember Vivid Memories, it's sort of got a mixed review so far, because it's sort of a deeper, more complicated version of Azul. But I think the criticism is that it's a little bit muddled, and it's not as, Azul, you can get to the table. It's clear, it's focused, it's, streamlined. Vivid Memories added a lot and a lot of overhead, but not a lot of extra, like just too much almost, if you will. Amygdala right now reminds me of both of those combined. And why do I say that? Because I read through the rulebook and I was a little bit confused. I had to actually look at John Gets Games' video of how to play this, because I could not visualize the mechanics that were there because of the terminology that they were using and just the nuance of some of the mechanisms. The essential gist of it is you have this central player board, and then you have your own individual player board. On your own individual player board, you have tokens that are going to be represented by emotions on these boards right here. And in order to unlock them, well, you have to have the resources present in your memory bank, which is essentially your inventory. And you only have 10 inventory slots that you can take up. And on your turn, if you ever have more than 10, you have to discard down to 10 at the end. You're taking one essential action every single turn. You're either moving around this central board, buying resources for coins at each of these lotus spots, and it becomes more apparent in his video, and you can see that there are 6 big lotus spots, and you can buy either one resource, because you see that there are 2 sides to each lotus right here, a left and a right. You can buy both of them, or you can buy one of them depending on what you want, how many spots you have, etc., how much money, all of those features. The second action is essentially you can unlock these emotions on here, which allows you then to be able to start capturing and put pieces on the central board, because that is the main mechanism in which you're going to be scoring victory points here at the end of looking at these 7 different areas and utilizing basically an area control mechanism in order to have the most victory points in each section. Now, it's a little bit more complicated than that, because you can have the most in a section or in a motion, as the game is themed, but if you do not have the special claim token, you don't actually score points. So you could have easily the most in any of those emotions, but you're not going to score any points unless you actually have the claim token there in the first place. So what happens with that is essentially if you have 7 and someone else has 5, but you don't have the claim token and they have their claim token, well, you're still first, but you don't get any points. Now, that is a good thing and a bad thing. 1, because you don't score any points, but 2, it is a good thing because that second place person doesn't just automatically move up to first. They stay with the second place point. So even if you can't get the claim token there, you can at least prevent someone else from necessarily getting as many points as they would otherwise if you just didn't have as many presents there, if you will. It's upgraded, it's deluxe, it's beautiful looking, but it's heavier than I was thinking it was going to be, especially from an abstract game standpoint. Now, they give you the 3 different levels here, and I don't like this font. This doesn't make it very easy to read. It's not very clear. It's a little bit scrunched up, but you can see sort of the differences in all of these pledge levels. But the deluxe pledge level is basically going to cost you $100 for shipping, and I'm not sure, even as an abstract lover, that I'm willing to pay that much of a price for this. The deluxe all-in is going to cost you nearly $150 for US, before, or including shipping from that standpoint. Metal coins, circumstance marker, that's another aspect, and storage boxes are all additional. So that's a lot. Now, subscribers, this is the very interesting thing. If you were subscribed before the campaign, it's actually a significant price differential. So that almost makes me, that is massive. That is a 25% price reduction. Now, that's, significantly enthusiastic for people who are subscribers, but that's for Game Brewer, not for Gamefound. You have to be a specific Game Brewer subscriber, and it gives you like a discount on all their crowdfunding campaigns. I don't know. How do you feel about that? That's a whole nother bag of worms right there, or a can of worms, if you will, because that's just like with Chip Theory Games' strategist level pledge is, yeah, it's a lot of money. Yeah, it's great if you like a lot of their games, and yeah, it's going to pay for itself because you're going to get a lot of them for free, but this one is just a discount. This one is you paying money, not even sure you're going to buy the rest of their games. So, player be aware in that sense. Here's all the different mechanisms that I mentioned in terms of moving, in terms of playing, in terms of scoring, based on moving these claim markers and these victory points and these emotions around, and collecting all of the things you need to go along with it. The John Get Games video is very good. I highly recommend you check that one out if you have any interest. I would actually recommend that one instead of reading the rulebook. I think you get more out of it in a shorter period of time, as opposed to a lot of these other campaigns that I've already featured this week, where I would make the main argument of reading the rulebook instead of watching the video. So that's basically what you need to know. I'm not sure if this is a good value or not. This is a very expensive abstract game. I would argue that I could get a lot of the other abstract games in my collection for this price total. And so from that aspect, it's going to make me probably have a significant pause on whether or not I'm actually going to get this game, as much as I actually like the idea and the concept of having something a little bit longer, a little bit more in depth from an abstract strategy standpoint. And I say that as an abstract lover. So there is Amygdala. Next up, we have the Umbrella Academy, the board game, a second launching. Previously was on Kickstarter, now is ported over to Gamefound from Mantic Games. You may know them from Hellboy, the game. Now, this is based off of the comics, the Netflix series, if you're more familiar with that. Now, it's a 1 to 5 player game in the style of Pandemic, and it's cooperative. How do you feel about that? Because the main gist of it is essentially Pandemic with card play driven mechanisms. It's definitely got the theme of Umbrella Academy. If you pull up the rulebook here, it definitely gives you those aspects and gives you the nuances of the characters, a little bit in terms of some asymmetry between the main characters that you're going to see and the villains you're going to go up against. But it's not necessarily dramatically different or giving you wide range of new type of gameplay apart from the core cooperative Pandemic-esque style, if you're looking for something different in that sense. Card-based play is going to be dependent on the number of players that you have, and then you are going to be essentially having a Save the World card that gets popped up in the middle of the game, just like the Pandemic Epidemic cards, if you're familiar with Pandemic Iberia. and you're going to be setting it up with all the different decks that you're going to be able to draw from, moving your characters around from location to location, and then having an action phase where you can fight depending on the symbol of the villain or the event that's on that location, resolving all of the events around the board, and then playing crisis or hazards that are going to cause you havoc, a la pandemic virus spreading in the first place. You defeat the main big bad and you win. That's the gist of the game. Now, the only difference otherwise from the previous launch is they've halved the funding goal from 50,000 to 25,000, and they've reduced the collector's pledge level from 75 pounds to 70 pounds. Does that make you more enticed, less enticed? It's already almost funded at 20,000 pounds in the first day with 300 people. I guess if you're a big Umbrella Academy fan, I guess this is the way to go. I don't see any role. If Pandemic had miniatures, that's essentially what this is looking like for me. I don't see the necessity from that aspect, and I think probably just from that side of things, I would be more than willing to pass on it. I'd be willing to give it a try for half the price or slightly less than half the price with just tokens, because I don't feel any lesser with Pandemic when they use cubes. And so from that aspect, as well as things like the Loop even, that did this at retail with more clever mechanisms, I see no reason to spend this much money on this type of game unless you are a super fan of the IP in the first place. And if you are, great. But for me, it's going to be a pass just for those reasons. You can check it out. Rado has a video here, as well as several other channels in terms of how you're playing and what it actually looks like. But it's a variation on that theme. And if that appeals to you, and if you're a big co-op lover, I mean, I am, but this one does not scream to me right now, I need to have this, especially at that price. But you can check it out if you're interested. Now, next up over on Gamefound, we also have Bretwalda, the Dark Ages in England, 1 to 4 players. Now, this is an area control game with miniatures. Well overfunded at this point, with nearly twice its funding goal, killing it with nearly 79,000 euros. So what do you need to know in this 1 to 4 player area control asymmetric style of game? Now, besides the aesthetic being beautiful, it's got to have gameplay. Now, you're going to be taking one of several different actions in this area control style game in 4 different types of areas that are present on this board. Now, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be trying to control the most Dalks, D-A-L-C-S, or 2 other end game conditions that can happen. You need a certain number of Dalks in order to end the game, 5, 6, or 7 potentially along those lines, depending on the player count. Also, it plays just 12 rounds. If you get to the end of 12 rounds, you score based according to the end game scoring conditions. The other is that if one player ever gets eliminated completely, all of their rulers are destroyed, then the game ends, and then victory is tallied based on the surviving number of players that is left. Now, you have the option of choosing from one of 3 different main rulers when you're starting out the game to give each faction a little bit of asymmetry, as well as secret objective cards called Chronicles, of which you choose 2 of 3 that you draw at the beginning of the game as your secret objectives. You can complete up to 2 of these Chronicles in order to help you control enough Dalk in order to win the game. As we scroll down here, you can already see that they're offering Gamefound exclusive content that won't be in the retail edition. So what does that actually look like, as well as getting a number of free items, which are going to be whatever part of the game. The aesthetic is very beautiful to look at, but there needs to be enough gameplay depth. Now, it's a miniature-based driven game, as I mentioned, and the price point is reflective of that, just with the base pledge alone being nearly $100. So apart from that, what else sets it apart from other area control games besides what I've mentioned? You have asymmetric lordship cards, which are basically special ability cards that you're going to be able to play anytime during the round in order to affect certain ongoings. One of the other aspects that's different in some of these different areas that I mentioned, of the 4 different play areas that are on the map, is that not only when you conquer an area do you have the option of destroying your opponent's stuff that's there, but you actually have the ability to take it over and even swap it out. Say in the harbor, if they have ships, you can not just choose to destroy them, you can choose to swap their ships out with your ships instead. There's also what they call the Treasury Gold and the Pretender token. If you are the person that is in first place in any round, you get the Pretender token, which allows you better access to going first in order to determine the flow of that round and what it's going to look like in order to give you an advantage. But you also get to break ties in whichever manner you choose if that happens that round. Now, the downside is you don't get access to the treasury that other people will have access to in order to bribe, negotiate, and, earn your way to the crown from that aspect. Those dulks that I mentioned are victory conditions, but they're brooches, essentially, that are used to claim the throne. You need to have enough support in that sense, and you can obtain them, as I mentioned, by the Chronicle cards, but there are also going to be spots on the board that if you control them, they will give you additional dulks. So in each one of these rounds, and for an example of a gameplay situation, at the beginning of a round, you determine what season it is. The season has a different effect on the map and on the influences that are going to happen in that round. Then after that, the pretender gets to go first, but they get to decide the turn order. So you get to choose either is it going to go clockwise turn order or counterclockwise, depending on how you want to go about things. And then you get 2 actions per round. And you go around in order 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you don't get 2 actions back to back, but it's going to be in sequential order of the turn order that was just decided. There are 5 different types of land units that you'll be using, developing, and training, but there are also 2 different types of ships that you will have at your disposal as well. They break down several of the different areas right here on the gameplay page, so you can see a little bit more detail, and the rule book is already there. The actions that we just kind of skipped past here in terms of being able to move, being able to recruit, or being able to develop your, upgrades, essentially, your tech tree for your kingdom. Battles are going to be slightly different. Now, I'm interested to see that they don't show that up top, but you can check it out down here, hopefully on one of the videos, or maybe they'll give us a little bit of overview like they did up there. No, so we'll pull up the rule book here, and you can see that there are going to be 4 different types of dice that you're going to be using and rolling in battle, and they're going to have different sides, including swords, shields, and blanks. So you're rolling it, you're playing your lordship cards that I mentioned, which are the special ability cards, and then the real benefit of that is at the end of battles, you get to draw more lordship cards to help you in the future. They only go through 2 rounds until either everyone is defeated or enemy units, whoever lost, has to move out of those areas in terms of the control. Gives you different health of the units here, of the 5 different land units that I mentioned, and so you get to just rinse and repeat based on that style of battling. Now, sea battles are slightly different. You draw the lordship cards at the end, and there's also a neutral situation. Different setup for 2 and 3 people, a la all the other area control games that are used to, that they're going to give different dynamics based on the player count, just with like Blood Rage or Rising Sun are all going to be variable in that sense. So obviously it's slightly different. The aesthetic is different than what we've seen. It's less fantasy, more based on realistic history. So how do you feel about that? But it's not an inexpensive price. I kind of skipped over that as a whole right here, but you can kind of see the rewards. 87 euros for the base pledge, and that's it. So how do you feel about that with 30 miniature buildings and all stretch goals? It's expensive. Are you better off or not getting something else that's already out there? Area control, just like worker placement. Is this going to stand the test of time? How does it hold up? How does it compare? I think you need to watch some of the videos. You get a fuller sense of what the rounds look like so you can see whether or not it's for you. That is Bretwalda. Check it out. So there you go. That is the roundup for this week. Everything you need to know about all of the new games that launched. Hopefully that was useful. Hopefully that was entertaining. Hopefully that was informative, if nothing else. And you enjoyed it. So now you have to do less research if you just watch this video than if you had to look at all these individual pages yourself. So a couple key ones that I was not expecting to like as much as I did, and we'll kind of see where these pledges go, especially because there's always 1 or 2 of those, like Roanoke, Pagan this week, and a few others just that, kind of fly under the radar. First in flight from last week. So just always interesting. As always, I really appreciate you watching in the first place. Hopefully I can entice people more with these videos with the more background. So if you have anybody that's out there looking for crowdfunding roundups, this is the place to go. Tell them to come over here. Tell them to subscribe. Tell them just to watch and give me a chance. That's all I'm asking for. I'm trying to get to 10K by the end of the year. So if you haven't subscribed, help me do that. I also have a Patreon down below because the new setup was expensive. So if you want to support me in any way like that too, I'm always for it. That's all I got. Good video, longer than I expected, but solid. Have a great weekend. I'm working all weekend, so hopefully your weekend is better than mine. Stay classy. Have a great day. See you around. Casting witches,